Good afternoon. I'm Elaine Martyn, head of the private donor group at Fidelity Charitable. Thank you for joining this conversation today, which we hope will deepen your understanding of philanthropy's unique role in impact investing and provide insights to help you align your charitable assets with your philanthropic goals. I am truly delighted to be joined by some of the brightest minds in impact investing and the philanthropy space today. Three colleagues who I'm delighted to also call friends, and I'm excited to introduce them in just a moment. But before we do so, let's just get quickly orientated to the topic. For those of you who are not familiar, Fidelity Charitable is the nation's largest grant maker. Through our Donor Advised Fund program, we distributed more than $9 billion in grants to over 170,000 charities across the world in 2020. This impact is all thanks to the generosity of our more than 250,000 donors who made a financial commitment to philanthropy by opening a charitable giving account. As part of my role, I have the unique privilege of leading a team that stewards some of Fidelity Charitable's most successful and strategic donors, helping them to maximize their philanthropic impact and enhance their legacy for the future. Over the last few years, we've seen our donors increasingly align impact selections with their values. And we now have over $1.5 billion in impact investments on our platform. And we've been partnering with the colleagues who are about to meet to do so. Donors have also been increasingly supporting impact investing nonprofits. And last year, Fidelity Charitable supported more than 6,000 donor recommended grants to impact investing nonprofits, totaling more than $94 million. The increasing popularity of impact investing in recent years signals its move from a relatively niche concept to a trend gaining support among individual donors at all levels. And we really are excited to explore the how of this today. So to level set for the attendees, really the basic definition of what we think of as impact investing is that it's exemplifying the idea that one can do well while doing good with one's investments. And so in other words, you can purposely make investments that help achieve certain social and environmental benefits and also generate financial returns. Impact investing refers to everything from investing in an organization with an explicit social mission to that's aligned with one's values, to avoiding investing in companies that practices that one believes have a negative social or environmental impact. And so traditionally, impact investing or investing in philanthropy have served two separate purposes. One, people might say investing is about making as much money as you can without regard to the social and environmental impact. I would maybe take issue with that. Or two, you can dedicate more of the earnings and asset growth for philanthropy. And what we have found is that impact investing is really disrupting that standard. And today it provides us with new opportunities for amplifying our charitable goals. And that's what we're here and excited to talk to you about over the next hour. So let's get to it. I am really thrilled to be here with three visionaries in the social impact space to hear their perspectives and insights. We've got Tracy Palandjian, CEO and co-founder of Social Finance, an impact investing and advisory nonprofit that builds innovative partnerships and impact-first investments to deliver measurable outcomes for our communities. We've got Cirilli, Managing Director and co-founder of Mission Point Partners, an impact investment management platform focused on solving large-scale environmental problems through the deployment of high-impact capital. And built out of that, he also was a partner in co-founding CapShift, which is a turnkey impact investment management platform aimed at enabling philanthropists who use a donor advised fund to access the impact investment market. And we're really excited to be partnering with both of them. And then one of our long-term partners is UNICEF. And we're so thrilled to have Cristina Shapiro, the president of the Impact Fund for Children at UNICEF USA. And the Impact Fund is the impact investing arm at UNICEF with two funds under management, the Bridge Fund and the FAST Fund, both of which have been super popular with our donors, and both of which provide innovative and attractive opportunities for impact investors and catalytic donors who are seeking to solve the biggest challenges confronting children worldwide. So we're going to structure this conversation in three parts. We hope to provide a deeper understanding of impact investing and its unique intersection with philanthropy. We want to illustrate how these concepts are successfully working together, and through specific examples, provide you with some tips on how you can leverage your charitable assets alongside your philanthropic goals. So full bios of these phenomenal speakers and resources from those speakers can be found on the conference portal in the bio section. I couldn't go into detail of all their accolades because it would take too long. But these resources have been pulled together by all of our panelists, and it will be a great tool to continue to amplify your learning in this space even further. So check out those bio pages for those details. Now let's get into the discussion. All right, Tracy, I'm going to turn to you to help us get orientated. To level set for our audience, can you tell us a little bit about social finance, and then talk a little bit about the evolution of impact investing from your perspective and the growing importance we've seen in philanthropy of impact investing?
Thank you so much, Elaine, and thank you for that warm and enthusiastic welcome to all of us. It's, as you said, great to be among friends and fellow travelers in the space with Mark and Cristina. Well, impact investing. I mean, you laid the ground for this movement and this accelerating movement, not least in the last 24 months. But if you were to take a step back, responsible investing, sustainable investing, or negative screens have been around forever, for decades. And if you really think about the public markets, quote, impact investing has been around for probably the better part of, say, 40 to 50 years. However, you really think about kind of like the newer definition of impact investing, and it's remarkable that it was only in 2008 that the Rockefeller Foundation actually coined the term impact investing in Bellagio, of all places. And that tighter definition, which is around intentionality of impact, that you're actually seeking investments to generate impact, to measure it over time, and to have the commitment to report it over time. That intentionality is typically around the private markets and impact investment opportunities in the private markets. And that market compared to the public markets is probably much smaller, but it's almost $1 trillion, according to the Global Impact Investing Network, that $1 trillion in assets deployed in this fashion. So it's a rapidly growing movement, and I'm sure everyone in the audience has heard of the stone soup, right? Like the alphabet soup, ESG, SRI, impact investing, and all the wonderful, impact measurement assessment tools, IRIS and, GEARS and all these wonderful things. And if you were to take a step back and say, why is this gaining such prominence and such importance in the marketplace? And I think that all of us just cannot deny the fact that the mounting social challenges, whether it's inequality, whether it's environmental degradation, however you look at kind of the world, and COVID has only laid bare so many of these challenges in a much more stark way, that the scope of these challenges is just far too great to just rely on government and charity, the traditional levers to solving social problems. And I think that there is a collective impetus and feeling that it needs to go beyond public policy and beyond charity. And that's where the capital markets come in. Wouldn't it be great to rethink the role of the capital markets to enable a more equitable and sustainable world, very much like what you said, Elaine, in your beautiful open remarks. It's disrupting this bifurcated brain that many of us kind of grew up with. Let me maximize my wealth in my for-profit activities, and I can make the world a better place through philanthropy, through giving it away, through grant making, through donations. And this world that you don't need to think about your financial return and impact in the world in this bifurcated way is really where impact investing comes in. And the scope of our challenges, if you look at the SDGs, right? Like some people even estimate that the gap is like $2.5 trillion a year. How are you going to find that kind of governmental resources or philanthropic resources? And that's where the collective responsibility of business, government, and civil society comes in. So very quickly, before I even turn to social finance, just like grant making, there's any flavor under the sun in impact investing. You can have market returns, you can have concessionary returns, you can just get your money back, you can even just get 70 cents on the dollar. But what's undeniably not a compromise is the intentionality to seek that impact. And it also spans all the asset classes, from the private markets, private equity, credit, impact real estate, cash, bespoke instruments. So it really runs the gamut. And here at Social Finance, we occupy a space in that really big tent. And we are a nonprofit, which also gives it quite a distinct feature. And we are about devising new instruments that really think about outcomes at the very center. So we're not just investing in companies whose service and products might deliver a good thing in the world, but we're actually saying, why are people's economic mobility stagnant? How do we construct an instrument about that so that we can actually make sure that every dollar of the investment returns back to our investors is tied to someone's life getting better? So over the last 10 years, we kind of grew up with impact investing, with the movement exploding. We have brought the social impact bond into the world, the career impact bond into the world. We thought about worker retraining and upskilling before the pandemic. And here we are, like that strategy is front and center. And we've been very lucky to have worked with lots of different types of impact investors over the years, not least Mark's business, the Donor Advised Fund, and your business, Elaine, the Donor Advised Fund, which holds such promise to fuel the movement.
Absolutely. Well, and it's interesting what you're saying about the trillions and the government and charities being the traditional solvers of these problems. When you get to the trillions of dollars that are now moving towards impact investing, it's interesting to think about what kinds of donors are aligning their philanthropic goals with these impact investments. What are you seeing?
Yeah, just very quickly, and Mark and Cristina could also answer this so well. It really runs the gamut. Obviously, individual donors and investors are a big part of this ecosystem, family offices, but also, large pension funds, banks and other financial institutions, corporate treasury, national foundations through mission-related investments and program-related investments, community foundations right in your own backyard, development finance institutions, and obviously donor advised funds. And I am so bullish on donor advised funds. We just kind of stumbled upon your segment, Elaine, like around 5 years ago, when we were just putting out a worker retraining social impact bond focused on immigrants and refugees. And then we're like, wow, there's a way to tap this $140 billion market to design what we call recoverable grants. The money goes out the door as a grant, but it has the likelihood of coming back to the donor's account to stretch the charitable mileage for their activities. So we're excited, but there's great diversity in the who of impact investing.
I love that. And, it's interesting as you're talking and you're talking about the alphabet soup, I'm really regretting that we didn't create a bingo card with all the complicated terms and letters that are out there. But recoverable grants has been an area that we've seen huge growth in. And Mark, I know you guys have been really great partners of ours. So can I turn to you to tell us a little bit about your organization, CapShift, and the unique way you're specifically supporting impact investors and philanthropists by enabling self-service capabilities versus like more hands-on guidance? I think it's been really a super attractive new model in the sector.
Well, first, thank you very much for having me. And I'm very excited to be on the call today and to get a chance to talk about what we are doing and how we can be helpful. So listen, to understand CapShift, I think you have to step back and understand some of my background. So I manage money. I co-founded a firm called Mission Point Partners. We're a leading advisor and asset manager in the impact space, and really working with ultra net worth individuals and philanthropic institutions to reach their impact investment objectives. Born solely with the purpose of trying to drive impact. So purpose built day one as an impact economy asset manager, and really trying to help transform and find transformational opportunities to solve environmental and social problems. And having done that, gosh, Tracy said 2008, and that reminded me of just how old we're getting here. I was very, very fortunate to meet an impact pioneer in Jesse and Betsy Fink, and to manage money in an unusual way early in my career, going back almost 21 years, starting on this journey. And interestingly enough, Elaine, you hit right on the question Jesse asked, and in essence, I told him, you have to make as much money as you possibly can and then give it away. That's what the tax code rewards you to do. And he said, bad answer, find me a better way. And so over the last 20 years, we really have been doing that at Mission Point. And what we did over 2.5 years ago with partners, the Heron Foundation, specifically, we tackled a major capital problem that we felt if we could unlock and create a pathway using donor advised funds as the corpus, we could radically democratize access to impact investing. And thought that was a very purposeful pursuit, and set out to build CapShift, the platform. So I'm a founder along with Jacques Perrault, the former Fidelity leader, and Adam Rain, my partner. And we set out to build the pipes that could give people access, both philanthropic institutions as well as donor advised funds, and eventually others access to the impact investment marketplace. And the way we do that is we studied a lot of the different obstacles and the challenges and the complexity, down to taxonomy and down to ways people think about it, organized the information as best we could. And we came out with a way to assess, rank and score and evaluate and give definition to the marketplace such that it becomes much easier to transact in. And ideally, over time, we can envision and reimagine a future where it's just as easy as, say, an angels list, or just as easy as a Morningstar database in the public marketplace, where people can search and evaluate and then act in concert to make change in the world in the impact space.
Yeah, I think that idea of how to make it as easy and simple as possible to engage people is one of the key elements here. And Cristina, I can't think of a better example than UNICEF for really playing a leading role in driving that innovation and in making it simple and easy for people to provide financing and move organizations to act fast in a time of crisis. So would you mind telling us a little bit about the UNICEF Bridge Fund, which has been one of our long-term favorite examples, and many of our donors have partnered around, and what its impact has been since its inception?
Sure, Elaine, thank you so much. And before I jump in, I do have to thank Mark for his journey, because we are benefiting from the pipes that he laid down with CapShift, and also, Elaine, the work that you and your team are doing through Fidelity. Instrumental. I think there's a ton more potential, as Tracy said, to tap into DAFs, but it is important and is helping us raise some of the needed capital that we have. So quickly, what is the Bridge Fund and what is our impact? So the Bridge Fund, in simple terms, was set up to solve a problem in around 2011. And that problem is that children need help before financial commitments are fulfilled or cash is secured, right? So, if you need to start an immunization campaign, you need to start it before an outbreak, not once the outbreak occurs and the cash is there. And so the Bridge Fund is a revolving fund that uses private loan capital and recoverable grants, Tracy, we will speak about that, to accelerate cash to UNICEF to bridge those timing gaps between financial commitments and receipt of cash. So in a nutshell, we function in many ways like a credit card for UNICEF. They raise all of this money on a cash basis as grants, but oftentimes they just need that credit, and we extend them that credit. And the way that we've been able to get that loan money is that we raised over time a pool of grants, which is now at about $18.3 million, which serves as collateral for this pool of fixed term, fixed rate loans. And then that loan money is what we accelerate to UNICEF. So we see ourselves very much as a low risk, fixed income type of product for investors. And I'll talk more about that. But the reason that we exist is, again, so UNICEF can complete immunization campaigns before diseases cripple or kill. ensure that materials are there before school season starts, not mid-season. And if you think about COVID, really important, ensuring that those supplies can reach healthcare workers so that those healthcare workers and community workers can continue to serve children. It has been really instrumental during the pandemic. And in terms of impact since inception, since 2011, the Bridge Fund has accelerated over $400 million and has reached over 1 billion children in over 40 countries with 0 defaults or write-offs. And then the impact that we measure our financing impact also in terms of the amount of time that we accelerate capital by. And on average, it's 4 months. So sometimes it's 6 months or a year, sometimes it's 2 months, but it is about the urgency. So we're very much an emergency response fund for UNICEF. And in order to mitigate risks and prevent defaults, we do perform extensive due diligence on the funders or donors that we're bridging, whether that donor is an individual, a foundation, a sovereign, or in many cases, a multilateral. And we look at not just their financial health, but their payment history with UNICEF. So do they have a track record of fulfilling their commitments? And then we obviously, we're also a nonprofit. We have strong governance. We have an independent board. And most of our transactions also get reviewed by our board. And we're really proud that when you think of our history, if you were a donor and provided money to that grant pool, for every dollar in that pool, we've been able to accelerate 24 to UNICEF already, and that money is going to continue to work because we've had no defaults. Every single grant dollar we've raised continues intact to support incremental leverage. So 24x impact if you're a donor. And then if you're a lender, we've fulfilled every one of our repayment and interest obligations and have often turned that capital twice a year and achieved significant impact and report on it quarterly for our investors. So really proud. Again, I've only been in the seat for about 15 months, so won't take credit, but we're absolutely growing and look forward to partnering with those on the panel with me, but many in the audience as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think the numbers and even just helping figure out how to get people acclimated to that idea of no defaults and quarterly reporting or biannual reporting. Those things are really critical, and it also really laid a foundation, I think, in part for how you all were able to step up and respond to the pandemic in a really significant way. And I think even early last year we were in conversation with you. So would you mind sharing with the group a little bit about how the Bridge Fund did respond and support pandemic response? Because I know, I think we know that UNICEF is the largest supply chain leader in the country or in the world, but we didn't know that before. So tell us a bit about.
Well, Elaine, I love it. You're covering some of the things I was going to say, which makes my job easier. But if you'll allow me, maybe I'd love to talk about the impact of COVID on children. I know during the pandemic, we often talked about, well, thank God, less children were affected, but children were definitely affected. Then what is UNICEF's role? And then what is the role of financing? Because I think that will put it in context. So impact of COVID-19 on children, it was a significant setback. I think it was the first time in 30 years that we saw a setback and progress being made against outcomes for children. 1.6 billion children out of school, 80 million children under the age of 1 missed out on life-saving routine immunizations. Again, UNICEF has done everything to get those immunizations back on track. But there was nonetheless that impact. And then because of the impact, there was an incremental 142 million children that fell into poverty. So just devastating in terms of that impact. Why was UNICEF tapped in terms of responding to COVID? So you said it. I mean, UNICEF is the world's largest vaccine purchaser. It buys 2 billion vaccine doses a year and to vaccinate 45% of the world's children. So in light of that, they were selected as a core operating partner and provided input in designing this innovative advanced market commitment to finance COVID vaccines called COVAX. And that's really, it was set up to help buy vaccines for the 92 low and lower middle income countries and brokering kind of the purchase. But their work was everything from purchasing the vaccines to preparing countries for arrival. I like to call it for getting vaccines to turn into vaccinations, right? It's purchasing, preparing for arrival, transporting it. So you got to figure out the freight to deliver all these vaccines, building confidence and eroding vaccine hesitancy, which we have it in this country, but it certainly isn't the only one to have it. In-country delivery, so by plane, donkey, or drones, you've seen UNICEF individuals carrying those vaccines and then getting those vaccines in terms. So that's UNICEF's role. Now, what's the role of the financing that we were able to deliver? Sorry, it took me a while to get to your question, but I think that context matters. And that is that the right financing accelerates all of those steps and is really critical. And I'm going to give you 2 examples. So in aggregate, the Bridge Fund helped to enable over $75 million in funding for COVID. We started as early as last April or early May, when the supply division at UNICEF called us and said, look, we need to start to buy PPE and send it out to low and lower middle income countries so that those healthcare workers can continue to work in the clinics, can continue to provide services. I mean, we're delivering services in refugee camps that have limited access to water. So you need those masks. We accelerated $10 million in bridge funding to UNICEF so that they could start to buy those supplies in advance of getting payment 6 or 9 months later, when those countries were working out funding from the World Bank. Because we allowed our fundings to stay with UNICEF for over 6 months, they were able to recycle it. So our 10 million allowed $21 million worth of purchases in PPE supplies, gowns, masks, oxygen concentrators. November, fast forward, we got a request to invest $10 million in the cold chain equipment in Nigeria. And that was so that Nigeria could ensure that it could get its routine immunization campaigns back on track, measles and polio. But if you fast forward, those same cold chain equipment purchases are now going to be carrying the COVID vaccine that's being distributed. So really critical. This is all about preparing for arrival. We are also a co-investor through the Bridge Fund in another revolving fund that provides pre-financing to sovereigns, to governments. And we've already enabled $15 million of purchases for middle income countries before they would have the cash available to pay for it themselves. And middle income countries do not benefit from subsidy from the Global Vaccine Alliance. They have to pay for these vaccines themselves. So oftentimes they don't have that cash ready. And what we didn't want to have happen is delay their ability to get their hands on those vaccines. So $15 million so far. And then we've also accelerated $24 million of our own fundraising to fund things like in-country delivery, pre-building confidence, and training healthcare workers. Because one of the things that we heard, Elaine, was in some instances, vaccines were in port, were in country, but we didn't have the cash to buy the equipment or pay for the freight or train the healthcare workers to make sure that those vaccines could actually get into the communities, that last mile delivery. So those are examples in terms of how we've been able to respond. But that is not enough. And there's a lot more in our pipeline that we are looking to fund in the coming year. But I'll stop there.
That's absolutely inspiring and brilliant. And I think so relevant, this idea of like that last mile in particular. Tracy, I wonder if you want to touch on what areas and issue areas and impact investment types you've seen have garnered the most attention from donors, from your perspective, because we know obviously COVID was a huge area of interest, but also that had a ripple effect. So just wondering if there's insights you can share with us on that side.
No, thank you, Elaine. Over the last 10 years, social finance is squarely in the S of the ESG. All our products are about unleashing human potential and really get on the S part of the ESG. So over the years, we've mobilized over $225 million across our different strategies, and particularly around COVID and coming out of COVID, the strategy toward building back better and building a more equitable and resilient workforce. And we launched a strategy, the Career Impact Bond, before the pandemic, and the interest has been explosive. And Cristina started talking about market failures, and this strategy is precisely targeted at completely rethinking our country's education and training system. People who are unemployed, people who are underemployed, people who've been displaced by COVID, and to really interrogate, is our current education and training system really delivering the workforce of the future, sectors of the future? So while we're kind of coming out of the pandemic, and even throughout the pandemic, there are still millions and millions of quality jobs out there that remain unfilled. I think at the lowest point during COVID, it went down to 5 million unfilled job openings. We're now way north of 8.2 million, the last BLS, Bureau of Labor Statistics data. over 8 million unfilled job openings. And these are in industries that are driving the economy of the future, in IT, in green energy, you know, offshore wind, in healthcare, in the skilled trades. And so, you know, we all kind of grew up with the mantra, you know, go to college because college is a ticket to the middle class. And I think what's been borne out in the last 50 years is that economic mobility has not worked well for the vast majority of Americans, and college is no longer, a 4-year degree is no longer a guarantee a pathway to the middle class. And the idea that one would borrow so much money to go to college, take time off from work to go to college, hopefully to pursue a better life and greater financial stability. Yet, if you look at the student debt data, it, you know, shows that there's $1.6 trillion of outstanding debt. And many of these people take on this risk, this burden, with no promise that this risk is actually going to pay off. But at the same time, there are these great short-term credentialing programs out there. You can go on a 12-week program and become a diesel technician. I think your colleague, Tracy Kenny, Elaine, put this in the chat. There's a New York Times article about the shortage of diesel technicians around the country, 200,000 people short by the year 2025. You know, think about all the stuff that we're ordering and shipping across the country, right? Truck drivers, diesel technicians. So we launched a series of career impact bonds through an investment fund called the Up Fund. It's a $50 million impact investment fund, completely focused on helping people who are underemployed, people from communities of color, marginalized and underserved communities, at no risk to them and no upfront cost to them, to go on the reskilling and upskilling journey, to become diesel technicians, to become coders, to become UX designers, to become licensed practical nurses, to become wind turbine technicians. And if they're successful and if they experience that wage bump, going from minimum wage, hourly worker, to a stable life of being in the kind of, you know, $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 category of wages, then they begin to repay their obligation in a student-friendly way. So that's how the Career Impact Bond works. And we're just seeing great resonance in the marketplace. We also have other tools like the Social Impact Bond, which is about turning taxpayer dollars, public dollars, you know, all those, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars that we spend as a state, as a county, as a city, to upskill people, to job training programs, and driving greater outcomes from the public spend. And we partner with Fidelity to enable the Social Impact Bond in Massachusetts to upskill immigrants and refugees to many of your donors. And that's also really been an exciting strategy that resonated with people. And then the third product that Fidelity has also been a huge partner in addition to the Up Fund, which is the Career Impact Bond Fund, the Social Impact Bond vehicle is the fund that we're putting together right now to enable Dreamers, DACA recipients, who are, by the way, while they are allowed to work in this country and attend public school, they don't get any of the federal programs, Pell Grants, loan programs to pursue higher ed. And we're putting together a fund to enable Dreamers to achieve their social and economic mobility goals. So these are the kinds of areas that are really resonating with donors from our perspective. I think also the marketplace is excited to see more S products, if you will, to complement the growing suite of climate solutions that are out in the marketplace.
Absolutely. You know, and I think what you both, Cristina and Tracy, you've touched on is this idea of everything from global health, education, climate change, career impact bonds, you know, economic mobility and empowerment. There are so many topics to choose from. And I think one of the things that we know is our donors get overwhelmed, but also they want to try it all. And on average, we see that a Fidelity charitable donor might be making 5 to 10 grants a year, to and hopefully as many investment selections as well. So Mark, maybe you can help us think about this. Like, so many of our donors are struggling to figure out and determine when to make an impact investment, when to make a direct donation to charity. How do you, and also even how to parse some of the project and issue areas? I mean, CapShift has done this so well. I wondered if you can talk to us about how donors should approach these topics.
It's so interesting. And I think we're seeing in this conversation both the challenge and the opportunity to reimagine what the future can hold in this conversation. The spectrum is very wide. This is why we created CapShift, to try to create some organization to this and allow people, in essence, to say, what do I care about? And to log that interest, and then allow that interest to develop over time based on experience and things that they can diligence or even read about and start to explore. It's not an accident that you have Cristina and Tracy, two amazing leaders and visionaries that are really solving some super important problems and doing it in unique ways. And I don't want to exclude that. They're a part of a huge community that's growing right now. And so at CapShift, really what we try to do is we try to organize that world and simplify it so that when you take a look at an investment opportunity or a recoverable grant opportunity, you have the confidence that there's something behind it. And we do those assessments and we try to put some structure to it. It's interesting, I'm just reading some of the questions just to give you a sense of it. So many different people are looking for so many different things. And that's the problem that we tried to tackle. And what we felt like is if we let that happen by itself, there's going to be a tremendous inefficiency to playing a matchmaker, both very high transaction costs, very high diligence costs, and not a lot of confidence in moving together in order to aggregate the solutions. And so what we've done, and I think if I was to give any advice to those on the call that are really looking to get started, the very first bit of advice is know thyself, and really try to understand and create congruency between what you're trying to accomplish and the resources that are necessary to accomplish that, and matching that with the objectives that you're trying to articulate. It's very, very hard to trade off, so to speak, all these different opportunities if you don't know really what you're trying to accomplish, and spend the most time trying to figure out. And the SDGs, the UN SDGs, do a pretty good job of creating some classifications that you can see almost as asset classes, and then say, I care about these 3 things, and this is the way I want to move the needle. And when you start to articulate that, then you can start to put that into practice. And the first thing that we see most of our investors and clients do is move from, say, the S&P 500 in just kind of broad-based US equity exposure. Many people we talk to, they don't even know where their DAF or their philanthropic assets are really sitting half the time, but we're all guilty of that. But the moving out of, say, generic holdings into specific thematically oriented holdings, gender specific, equality, social justice, through to environment. And just a great example is moving from the S&P 500 to an S&P 500 without the fossil fuel liability that exists in the equity market. Even little moves like that do make a difference, and they start to get you into motion. Eventually, most people do end up, in my observation over the journey, really starting to be able to articulate their goals and getting very pointed with what they're trying to do. And so if at the end of the day, job creation is a very important for quality and high quality jobs in a social justice context, getting involved in the upfund is like super important stuff. I mean, because I actually spend a lot of time in this area, and the biggest obstacle we have into moving a huge amounts of our workforce into much higher paying jobs is simply the training and who pays for the training. Tracy's come up with a way to do that, right? And I think these are very important, highly leverageable investments or recoverable grants in the upfronts case that can have dramatic impact. And I like to call it impact leverage. And my visualization and my mantra over the last 20 years has been 1, 10, 100. A dollar tracks $10, $10 creates $100 of outcome. And I think in terms of the 1, 10, 100, when you're thinking about recoverable grants or impact investing, the leverage is just dramatically different than just plain granting. By the way, nothing wrong with that in many cases, It's just, there are very different opportunity sets available today.
Absolutely. And I guess, Tracy, I just turn to you to see if there's anything you want to add to that in terms of advice to, I love the know thyself, but other guidance and advice you'd give to donors looking to get started in aligning in this space?
Experiment. I'm just thinking about what I know now versus what I knew 5 years ago, 10 years ago, when, you know, we started social finance. It's just, it's the experimentation process that makes it exciting. And it's kind of maybe part of Mark's know thyself, because you will know thyself much better through doing rather than simply just thinking and reading. In terms of, you know, what is the best pot of capital to experiment, I have to go back to your business, Elaine, and we actually launched what we've been told the largest national donor survey among donor advised fund donors on their attitudes toward impact investing last year. This was support from the Rockefeller Foundation, and the results were extraordinary. You know, so of the $140 billion just sitting in donor advised fund, and Fidelity has a lion's share of it, but it's also, you know, other platforms like Vanguard and Schwab, and at the various banks, community foundations, right? They occupy a big part of this AUM, as well as faith-based, you know, the Jewish Federation. So we surveyed a bunch of them, and the donors over and over came back to us and said that 70% of these account holders said that they're willing to invest up to almost a quarter of their investment portfolio in impact first program. Recoverable grants was the word. Why? Because the assets have already parted with the donor. They've gotten their tax deduction. It's just sitting there. And so we feel that this is a really opportune area to do a lot of experimentation and to learn together with the field. And DAFs have such a powerful opportunity to really lead the rest of the field, given its already charitable status. And we're just so heartened by your commitment, Elaine, and Fidelity, and Pam's commitment to impact investing more broadly, how you're showing up in the industry and leading the field. So let's go.
I love it. And you know, one of my goals is eventually to have all of our donors taking a chance on some kind of impact investing opportunity, whether it's one of our pooled funds, whether it's a recoverable grant, whether it's partnering with the CapShift platform, or doing, you know, a PRI loan-like model. I think there's so many ways you can enter this space. And for individual donors, I love the idea of just trying something. And the good thing is, the point of impact investing is that it will come back to you. And we know that the models are working. So I guess if I could turn to you, Cristina, we have a lot of corporations and individual donors on the call today. And I was curious if you could give some advice to them as we think about donors and corporate programs on how they could get involved with impact investing from UNICEF's perspective.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Thank you so much, Elaine. And I mean, I think Tracy and Mark have really covered a lot of the advice that I'm going to give. But I do think one thing that we saw with both the Fast Fund and the Bridge Fund was that we were able to look at traditional donors to UNICEF. So people who had given a traditional grant where it goes out and never comes back. And they loved this idea of suddenly having an additional tool where they could either provide a leveraged grant. And by leveraged grant, I mean, it's a grant, it never comes back to the donor, but Mark, it's your concept of 1 to 10, right? You put in a grant, but that grant is now being used to lever up 3.5, 10, whatever money that is, which is exactly how the Bridge Fund works. So now your dollar is living in perpetuity, or even if it's not, it's achieving multiple impacts than that simple dollar. And so I would urge you to think about, if you're already a donor, are those organizations or those nonprofits able to take on a different form of money? Maybe they already are and you just don't know it because you haven't looked into it. And therefore, to Mark's point, know thyself, you know the causes you care about, but now you can start to invest in a different way. Similar with recoverable grants, what we saw is there were also donors of UNICEF who were giving straight out grants, but once we launched the recoverable grant product, this allowed them to go into their investing pocket, right? So it was just, even if it's already in their DAF, it was in their pool of money that they wanted to provide for a purpose, but they wanted to have the option to have it back. And that was very different than what they deemed their philanthropic pocket, which is money that I'm giving away and I never want to see it back, even if it's already in a DAP, which has already taken a charitable contribution. So I just think that really urging you to think about your risk appetites and where you're willing to experiment. As Tracy said, there's many different ways, even in the grant space, to move from a traditional grant to what I call a leveraged grant to a recoverable grant. And then, there's many other ways to think about, if you want to be impact first, to really think about, are there entities out there that are in thematic areas that you care about that could benefit from below market rate or patient debt, where you'll be able to preserve your capital, likely get a modest return on investment, and your dollars may be even used to attract additional senior dollars. So really impact, and there you're experimenting, but you're preserving your capital. Most staff support these types of products today, but so I would just say really experiment, and I would say don't assume that your only option is a straight out grant. I think a lot of nonprofits are innovating and scaling and can take on different sorts of funds. I know we have. Tracy clearly has, and she's an innovator in this space. And certainly Mark is helping us all access the right type of funds along with you, Elaine. So with that, I'll stop there and hand it back to you.
Yeah, and I would just add to that we've seen donors are willing to go a little bit bigger. When they are ready to do that impact investing, they're willing to do a larger sized impact investment than perhaps a grant that they may be making to that organization. And I think that's benefiting everyone, right? It's helping the sector, it's expanding the dollars into the space. And it's also, because oftentimes it's time bound, we're seeing that there is a true return, that people are getting that impact, and then it's going back into the sector again. So I think I would just echo everything you're saying. And I know we're cutting close to time. I'll just put one question out there that's come in, which is, we've seen a serious loss of women in the workforce due to COVID. And we were curious about programs that are out there that are specifically focused on upskilling women as they hopefully return to the workforce. I don't know if you've seen any of that in your work, Tracy, Mark, Cristina, if you want to weigh in.
I'm happy to weigh in. One of the investments in the Up Fund, the fourth Career Impact Fund that we just launched, is with an amazing coding boot camp in Portland, Oregon called Alchemy Code Labs. They specialize in getting women into the IT workforce. And why are there so few women? It's hard for women to take time off from their parental and work duties and all the other barriers that they face. And often, especially women who've been displaced by hospitality and retail jobs, that really kind of go up that massive mountain to get reskilled in a completely different environment. It takes more than just showing up in the classroom and getting tuition support. So that particular Career Impact Fund, we're actually financing a living stipend so that the students, the female students, can actually focus on completing the program and focus on persisting and getting the skills, and not have to, keep 3 jobs to pay rent, transportation, and childcare. So that particular deal is very much focused on the needs of women, and the program design as a result is precisely building a financing that address also life. Life shows up, and it's not just tuition support, it's also support for all the barriers that we have as a mother, as the caretaker of others.
Thank you so much. I can't believe how quickly this session has gone by, and I know we could talk for ages. There's questions coming in around, how to interest and engage impact investors from the nonprofit perspective. That should be a whole nother session that we do with Social Innovation Summit next year. And I just really want to thank all 3 of you and your organizations for your leadership, not just this in the past year where it's been so needed, but really in influencing and changing the way the sector has been able to operate and evolve over the last 10 years. I think we are really privileged to have your vision and leadership shaping that, and I can't thank you all enough. Before we close, I just want to give you an opportunity to say just one word of advice that you'd give, any inspiration that you want to leave this audience with as we think about innovation and impact investing. Any last blurb?
I would urge people to engage. You have to engage, you have to ask questions, you have to dig in. Now's the time.
Mark?
Yeah, now is the time. There's way more opportunities to do way bigger things at a time when we need to. And I think that if we're able to unlock this capital, we can make the world a better place for sure.
And I would end by a quote that I love from my friend David Bornstein, which is that government is the IPO of social change. Where possible, look for impact investment opportunities that poke at the public system, because that's a system that spends billions and now trillions on solving social problems.
Wonderful. Well, I look forward to the leadership of this audience and the three of you as we continue to poke and challenge the system. Thank you all so much for your leadership and for your time. It's been great to be with you.
Thank you, Elaine.
Thank you.
And that concludes our session. So I look forward to seeing you all in breakout sessions throughout the rest of the week.